Here at the Bush School, we pride ourselves on public service, as President Bush said, to our communities, our states, and the nation. That's why the Bush School exists here. That's why we opened our doors in 1997 by President George H.W. Bush, a consummate public servant in his own right, opened this school here. Now, today is a solemn day in our nation's history. It's September 11th. Now, I know most of you, probably all of you, were not born at that time. It was about 6 years before most of you were born. But it was a terrible day, but it was a day that initiated all types of public service and showing what this nation, with our allies, could do when united. So for this convocation ceremony, we're going to talk about public service in the context of what happened with 9/11. And shortly, I'm going to be joined by some American heroes on stage here, whose bags I'm not even qualified to carry, and I'm honored to be up here with them. But as we start this, I want to give you a little background. What was 9/11? Now, I know most of you have learned well about this in school before you even got to here, but let's just level set for everybody. It was an attack by an extremist organization called Al-Qaeda, which in Arabic means the base. It came out of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in the 1980s, and it was led by a man named Osama bin Laden, and he was the chief of Al-Qaeda. This group had attacked the United States before. They had attacked us in 1998 when they hit our embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, killing a couple dozen Americans and hundreds of local nationals in those two nations, and with a boat laden with explosives hitting the Navy ship USS Cole, which was moored in Yemen for refueling. So we knew who they were. But then on 9/11, they hijacked four American aircraft, civilians on board, with the intention of flying them into U.S. landmarks. And you probably know this well. The targets were the two World Trade Center buildings in New York, the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia, as well as what may have been the Capitol or the White House. But we'll never know on that last one, because the passengers of Flight 93 stormed the cockpit of Flight 93 and wrested the controls in a fight with the terrorists, and the plane crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. They were the first soldiers in the American War on Terror, and they're heroes. But it was a tough day in American history. You can see the number up there in red. We lost nearly 3,000 people, not only American citizens from the world that were in the World Trade Center from many countries around the world. It was an attack on freedom, democracy, goodness. It was a tough day in American history. Those of us that were alive and serving at that time, it was a shock. What started as a crystal clear blue day, like we've seen earlier this week here in College Station, has now been seared in our memory. For example, with black smoke coming from the Pentagon against that blue sky, seeing the terrible footage of the World Trade Centers coming down that were landmarks to my generation, as sure as the landmarks are in New York nowadays and other cities. Seeing the devastation of the Pentagon and the crater in Shanksville from Flight 93. It was a tough, tough day. Now, me personally, I was serving in the White House Situation Room. That's not only a conference room in the White House, it's an operations center to support the President of the United States, who at that time was President George W. Bush, son of President George H.W. Bush. Looking at the lower right-hand picture is a guy with brown hair and not gray hair anymore. That's me leaning against a column there with some of my colleagues. Now, this was earlier in 2001, but those same folks would be serving in the sitting room with me on that day, serving as an intelligence node. I was with the CIA, one of the CIA reps there, and when the attacks happened, we witnessed this firsthand. We saw Vice President Cheney and National Security Advisor Condoleezza Rice rush to a bunker under the White House. We were taking calls from everyone from the mayor of New York to the military to Federal Aviation Administration, getting the reports, of course, seeing what we saw on TV, but also understanding what was going on in the skies. Some of it was very muddled, confused. I was honored to work with those men and women in the sit room. They called us the dead list because when they evacuated the White House, because they thought Flight 77, the plane that hit the Pentagon, or Flight 93, the one that crashed in Pennsylvania, was bound for the White House, they told us, get out, get out. But my teammates and I, we said, we're not leaving, because the leaders in the bunker would not be able to communicate with President Bush, who you see there on the phone, at an elementary school in Florida. So they passed a piece of paper around, said, put your name on it. We're going to fax it to CIA headquarters. We were not about to leave our post, because had we done it, there would be no communications. President Bush would not be able to be kept up to date what was going on. You see a picture of fighter planes off of the wing of Air Force One. That was something we suggested. Having the strongest nation in the world, but a president flying around Air Force One unprotected when we had over 5 aircraft, even after the planes had hit the landmarks, unaccounted for. And to be able to make sure he's protected. I was the one that made the suggestion, and one of the senior people in there said, John, you've seen too many movies, but it's the right call. And we thought those fighter planes would come out of Florida. They came out of Ellington Air Force Base in Houston. From Texas Air National Guard, 3 of them. 2 got on the wing, 1 got on the tail. And that picture on the upper right there is a small American flag that is now at the Flight 93 Memorial, where they have the names of the Flight 93 passengers. And they have a little flag in front of each one of them. And that flag happens to be in front of one passenger named Todd Beamer. If you don't know his name, you should. Because on audio from Flight 93, you hear him say, let's roll, before he and his fellow passengers rush that cockpit. And in the days after 9/11, let's roll would be on the nose of American fighter planes and bombers as they deployed to the Middle East and South Asia to go ahead and get after the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and others. So what I did in 2019 on one of my several visits there, I brought a White House Situation Room coin and put it on his flag. It stayed there for months and months, I'm told, by colleagues who visited there. The Park Service left it there. Todd Beamer and his colleagues are heroes. We should never forget. Public service takes many forms. It can be in a classroom, a hospital, a city hall, and yes, on a plane that's been hijacked by terrorists who intend to do unspeakable harm and terror. And those passengers on Flight 93 were perhaps the ultimate public servants, serving all of us and all of you. That's what 9/11 is to me personally, being there at the sit room that day, supporting President George W. Bush and others in our national security establishment. But now, I'd like to introduce some real American heroes here. First, I'd like, and they're going to come out to the stage, Mr. Greg Vogel, retired Central Intelligence Agency operations officer. Greg, if you could just start on this seat here at the end. Thank you. Next, Clay Bryan, U.S. Air Force Staff Sergeant. Clay. Ms. Liz Sherman, Central Intelligence Agency, retired, and also National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Next, Colonel retired Dan Debris, United States Air Force. And finally, Ambassador retired John Hennessy Nyland, State Department. And I should have added, all of these folks are professors at the Bush School. You'll see them in the hallway in your classes. They're serving you right now. So I'm going to come sit by you all, but the questions are going to be for each of you, and we're going to start down on the end with Greg. Where were you on 9/11, and what did that day do to the trajectory of your career, your life, and your service? And we're going to take about 7-8 minutes with each person. So Greg, over to you first, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. My name's Greg Vogel. I'm a professor of the practice here at the Bush School, and I'm retired CIA, 31 years. I was a Marine before that. I was in Peshawar, Pakistan, which is right on the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. And we were focused on Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, as the dean referred to. We were working on that target. And I can remember like it was yesterday, 9/11. One of my most vivid memories is looking up at a TV screen inside our small base, and we were all watching CNN because we were following what was happening. And the second plane hit the tower, and we knew right then that this was Al Qaeda. We knew that this was a strike against the homeland, this attack against our country. And during that day, there was various videos that were being shown on CNN, and the one that still sticks in my mind to this day and carried me through the next decade was a clip of a New York City firefighter who was covered in soot, sweat, hard-looking dude, New York City firefighter, direct and to the point. And a journalist came up and put a microphone into his face before the second tower came down. And she said to this firefighter, "You're not going back in there, are you?" And he looked at her with a kind of incredulous look on his face. And he said, "You're damn right I'm going back in there. That's my family, those are my friends, and it's my job." And that's what drove me for the next decade. I was honored and humbled to take one of the first teams into Afghanistan. And I spent the next 7.5 years out of 10 deployed either in Afghanistan, Iraq, or Yemen, going against that target, because we were not going to let justice go unserved what he did to our country. Now, when I was growing up, I was fortunate enough to grow up with the greatest generation, probably your great-great-grandparents. They were my parents, all right? And they always talked about December 7th, 1941, how that impacted their life. And I never really understood what they meant about December 7th, 1941. But on September 11th, 2001, I knew exactly what they were talking about. Our country had been attacked. Our fellow citizens had been killed. Those just like you that got up that morning and went to work, expecting to come home and grab their loved ones and kiss them and put them to bed, they didn't. They attacked our country. And now it was up to us to go and do what needed to be done. Now, here's the key point that I want you to remember out of what I say today. That day, I saw this country united like I had never seen it before. This country was focused. It was together. It had an objective, just like that greatest generation had in 1941. Unfortunately, you haven't seen that yet. Unfortunately, our country's kind of divided right now. But I'm going to tell you something, gang, that I want you to carry with you for the rest of your lives. When this country is united, stand by. You got 3 choices. You can drive the train, you can ride the train, or you can be under the train. But when this country leaves the station together, united, there is no country on the face of the earth that can do anything that we can do. We're the greatest nation in the world. And today's a very special day for me. I think all the people that aren't here, that I had the honor and the privilege to serve with, that didn't come home, that paid the rent for this nation. Many of their names are over in the MSC on the wall there that you honor when you walk through. And it's my obligation today to leave you with a message that I believe they would want you to hear. You have been given a privilege. And that privilege is to be a citizen of this country. It is the greatest country on the face of the earth. Take it to the bank. I know it. But with that privilege comes 2 things that I never want you to forget. You have a responsibility to those that came before and those that are with you right now to leave this country better than you found it. And now here's the most critical part to all those people that paid the price for our country. You have an obligation to them to leave this country better than you found it. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm counting on you to bring this country together, unite us, and lead us forward. God bless you. God bless America, and gig 'em.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg, for those powerful words and really giving us a strong charge on that. Next, we're going to switch to Clay. Now, you've got a little bit different perspective on 9/11 as you were getting ready to come into service. So if you could share that with us, please, sir.
Sure. So on September 11th, 2001, I was where a lot of you were about a year ago. I was a senior in high school. And I remember the morning clearly. I was in Mr. Simmons' pre-calculus class, and the announcements started coming over the intercom. And by the time we made it to Miss Foster's English class, all academic pursuits were abandoned, and we watched for the rest of the day as these events unfolded. And the conversations amongst us, just the students, began, what are we going to do about this? Because we knew we're of age to join the military and to contribute or respond to this in some way. And so a lot of us really began having those conversations pretty earnestly. And it was a few years later when one of my first high school friends, I learned, had lost his life in Afghanistan due to an attack, that enlistment really became a reality for me. And I went to the Air Force recruiter and I said, look, I want to get involved here. I want to get my feet wet, and I want to do something about this, because sitting by and just watching it was no longer an option. And this was watching things happening in Iraq. In March of 2003, when we invaded Iraq, and then just a few months later, in December of 2003, when Saddam Hussein was captured. All of these things were leading up to what we would ultimately experience in May of 2011. And that was when President Barack Obama got in front of the cameras and said, "We've killed Osama bin Laden." And the feeling at that point was just overwhelming. By that time, I was an intelligence analyst with the National Security Agency. And the pride that we felt at that moment, knowing that we had spent all of these years working towards finding him, going after him, and finally killing him, was a big, big day for us. And knowing at that point there was still a lot of work left to do. And so in many ways, more ways than one, 9/11 completely changed the trajectory of my life, because on September 10th, the military was not on my radar. Working in national security was not on my radar. And the events of that day completely changed all of that. When we watched what was happening and knew we had to respond somehow.
Here. Thank you so much, Clay, for stepping up on that. And now I'm going to switch to Liz. Yes, we're married, and so our stories are going to be a little intertwined here, but hers is truly unique and heroic. So Liz, tell us a little bit about where you were on 9/11 and then how it affected what you did in the years after.
First of all, thank you all for being here and being willing to learn about 9/11, which is a very, very important time in all of our lives. I was an imagery analyst at the National Intelligence Mapping Agency, now called NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and I would look at imagery of Somalia. And I'm sure some people are like, Somalia, why are you covering Somalia? And it was just an interest I had in East Africa. When the first planes hit, I have to say I'm a little embarrassed. I wasn't really, I didn't react. I was like, oh, poor person had a seizure and hit the building. And then the second plane came, and then I started to go, wait, there's something going on here. And then the Pentagon was hit. And then the plane crashed in Pennsylvania, and I started to panic because I knew John was at the I'm so sorry. So my boss came out and she said, all right, everyone, this is the situation. And she said, the Twin Towers have been hit, the Pentagon's been hit, and the White House has been hit. And then everything in my head I just thought I was going to faint. So I went to the phone And I tried to call the White House, and it was that really sick, busy signal as if it had been crashed. And so I broke down and cried. And I said, I can't get to my kids. They were little, 5 and 3. They were at a daycare, and I didn't have any family in the area. So I thought John was killed, and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't get home because the metro was closed. And I'm sorry. It's just... So finally I called the White House again, and his friend answered and said, Liz, we're okay. So I knew, okay, toughen up, get through this. I had to find a ride home. I finally got a hold of the daycare. All the kids were gone because the parents got them. And I said to the owner of the manager of the daycare, please take my kids home and please don't let them know what's happening. And so finally, a friend takes me home, and we drive by the Pentagon, and we stop. And there was no one in the city, and I saw the Pentagon on fire, and I thought, oh my God, what is happening? So we finally all get home. I hug my family. I tell John I love him. And then the next day, we all went to work, and like Greg said, everyone was united. Everyone. There wasn't any division, and it was a very beautiful feeling. And I was looking at my imagery, and I saw something suspicious that was related, that could have been related to what had happened. So I wrote a report, I published it, and my phone never stopped ringing. And people at the White House were saying, hey, who covers Somalia? We need a Somalia expert. And I said, thank you. I said, that's me. And so I realized I had to toughen up and be focused. And my life has always been dedicated to protecting our country after 9/11. The war was not just in Afghanistan, it was in Iraq, it was in East Africa, it was all over the place, and we had many people fighting for us. So my life and my kids' life and my husband's life, we are all very, very emotional on this day. This morning I've been very, very upset and sad because I'm thinking about you all, and like Greg said, our country is divided. It's very sad. I thought that we would have done all the work where you didn't have to go through all of this. I thought we were done, and we're not. So it's now your turn. It's your turn to make this country united. And I hope it doesn't take a tragedy. I just hope it takes all of your force, a force for good. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Liz, for that. Thank you. Now we're going to switch to Dan, Air Force officer. Tell us a little bit about where you were, and of course, how it changed the trajectory of your career there as an Air Force aviator.
Thanks, Dean. Howdy, everyone. As the Dean said, I was in the Air Force. I was mid-career at that time. I was a major. So I had been in the Air Force for 10 years. I had been deployed to war. I was a backseater in F-4s and F-15Es, just an absolutely dream job. Loved doing it. And at the time, I was used to being on the tip of the spear. I was used to going to war. But at the time, I was actually, just by luck and happenstance, I was going to school like you guys. I was going to this very, very prestigious institution called Marine Corps University. And I was an Air Force officer going through my intermediate service school. So it's one thing we have to do. And I remember very, very vividly, as the dean said, just the thought of that day, the crystal clear sky, beautiful day. And Marine Corps University is in Quantico, so it's only about 30, 40 miles south of DC, so very close to DC, but it was clear, wonderful day. We're in the classroom learning about, I don't know, it was probably Napoleonic battles. I don't know what it was, but Iwo Jima, exactly. Marine Corps University. Every day started with Iwo Jima. But the commandant of the school comes into the classroom and says, "Turn on the TV." And I have never seen this guy. This guy was as calm and cool, as collected as can be, as most Marines are. And I have never seen him like that. And he says, "Turn on the TV now." So the professor turns on the TV, and obviously the first thing that comes up is the first tower's been hit. So class is over. Like Clay said, class was over. And the rest of the day, we're sitting there watching. So it's all military officers, mid-level career, and we're watching, and we know that we are now at war, okay? Or we're going to be at war very soon. And where are we? We're sitting in a classroom, and we're going to be sitting in the classroom for the next 8 months, okay? There was a level of frustration there, and that was definitely palpable, okay? There's a moral to this. So very quickly over that next 8 months, we go to war in Afghanistan, and then we're fighting in Afghanistan. There I am. I don't have my jet. I can't fight. In school, there's that frustration. But there was an opportunity for me to stay for a second year with the Marine Corps. And when we were fighting in Afghanistan, we were fighting insurgents, right? And a non-traditional enemy, something I had never done, okay? In fact, we used to joke in the F-15E that close air support was an emergency procedure. We looked down on it. We didn't want to do it. We wanted to do interdiction. It was much, that was our bread and butter. But I kind of knew from Afghanistan, and then there were rumblings about going back into Iraq, that close air support was going to be something that I needed to be able to do. And so, against some of my mentors' advice, I applied to stay another year, which just killed me, but stay another year at Marine Corps University and go to their School of Advanced Warfighting so that I could work with the ground troops, the ground fighters, particularly the Marines, but there were also Army officers and international officers in that class, and figure out how to do this close air support thing so that when I did get back to the fight, I would be much more prepared to do it, okay? Well, you know what happened on the second year? We invaded Iraq. And I'm like, oh my gosh, horrible decision. Here I'm now again out of the fight. And I was not used to that. I was used to being on the front lines. Anyway, it was the right decision because when I went back, I became a squadron commander. I trained my unit significantly differently than they had ever trained before, or I had ever trained before, to fight the fight we were now in. And every single combat mission from there on out, and there were 6 combat deployments after that, so I didn't miss much. I had plenty of combat after that. In fact, I spent most of the rest of my career deployed, was a close air support mission. Every single combat mission. 2 rounds in Afghanistan, and I don't know how many in Iraq, okay? They were all close air support. So it was the right decision. It made me a better warrior. My point to you is it did change my trajectory, and there was a conscious decision. So no matter where you are, when something absolutely definitive like that happens, it's one of the few things that was so crystal clear, 9/11, that this is changing things. Make the decision. You're not out of the fight, and prepare yourself for the fight you're going to go into. You'll be back in it eventually, okay? And make the changes you need to change. And that was my experience, and it definitely changed the trajectory. So.
Well said, Dan. Thank you on that. Greg was originally a Marine recon officer, so there's a little bit of friendly inter-service banter going on up here. Absolutely. Now, we've heard from military and intelligence. Now, my colleague here, John, is going to tell you about the view from the Foreign Service, where he has spent a very long and impactful career. So, John, if you could tell him where you were and how this changed the trajectory of your career leading to become an ambassador.
Thank you, Dean. Howdy. To be honest, I'm honored to be on the stage with people I do consider heroes. I do not consider myself a hero, but I do think personal stories matter. It's what people do that makes a difference, and you, I know, are going to make a difference in the future. I too, of course, remember that day. I wasn't in the United States. Like most diplomats, I was overseas, even though my family was back in the Washington, D.C. area. I was in Geneva, Switzerland. A nice place, a beautiful day as well. I was at a meeting at the United Nations headquarters there, and I was part of a U.S. delegation. And I recall very, very distinctly that we were in a large meeting room just like this. The only difference was that we were representing countries, and there were over 100 plus in that conference room, and we were sitting proudly behind the placard that read the United States of America. And we were representing our country at probably what was a mundane meeting about some technical issue that really doesn't matter anymore. But we were doing our jobs, and all of a sudden, quietly, in the very Swiss way, a Swiss officer from the military comes walking down, just like these aisles here, and he stops. He stops at our delegation. And I was mid-career, I was not the head, and he leans over and quietly whispers to the ambassador, Ambassador, your delegation has to leave now. As you can imagine, we were confused, we were surprised, a little bit indignant, actually. What are you doing telling us to do anything? And then he leaned in real close so that no one else could hear and said, Ambassador, I really do have to insist. You have to leave now. To his credit, the ambassador and the rest of us gathered up our papers and we walked out. Of course, this is before the days of instant communication or cell phones. We had no idea why we were being asked to leave. Highly unusual. People in the room, a room just like this, started to talk and wonder, why is the U.S. walking out? And when we got to the top and through the doors, there was a contingent of Swiss military kitted out, armored cars out front for us. They asked us to pile into these vehicles and then explain quietly out of earshot, your country is under attack. Yeah, it does get you. And so we went back to the embassy, not quite knowing what he meant. And when we arrived at the embassy, people were crying. You know, and we have lost people before in the Foreign Service. I had friends in Nairobi. But on that beautiful day, I wasn't expecting that. So, you know, we're meant to be tough, right? We're meant to be in control. I'll be honest, I felt helpless. We couldn't reach Washington. All the communications were down, classified, secure, unsecure. Of course, it's because everyone was trying to reach Washington. People in the embassy were feeling angry, upset. I arrived with the delegation just before the second towers were hit. And we all, as Greg mentioned, were glued to watching the TV. And then reports of other attacks. And a report that even the State Department had been attacked, which turned out not to be true. But let me make this personal to you. At that time, I had two sons. They're grown men now, thank goodness. One was in, the start of school was September. He was the first week of big school. He was in kindergarten at Tuckahoe Elementary, not very far from the Pentagon. My youngest was in daycare, even closer. I could not reach my wife. I saw the smoke, from the Pentagon. My wife was very close to that. She could not reach her kids. I didn't actually reach my family by phone until several days. I didn't make it back home for several days. You might recall that the airspace was closed. In the end, quite a few of us were brought to Brussels eventually, and then flown via Gander, and then back home. I lost friends in Nairobi. I had colleagues who were working in New York who were also killed. And obviously I had neighbors on my street in Arlington, Virginia, who died at the Pentagon. So that's a day I remember. And you know, I don't think I ever wavered, but certainly on that day, to be honest, I felt not just a personal loss, but helpless. But you know what's the great strength about America? Is we may take a punch, but we know how to fight back. And we rallied, and we were united. And then ultimately, later in my career, I had the distinction of serving in Pakistan, going to Peshawar quite often, continuing the mission, which was to protect America and defend our homeland. And I know that you are charged with that same responsibility. And let me finish with this too, because I think we're all aware of the tragic event that took place yesterday as well. This is a difficult time. We need to be united. We need to reunite, because when America is united, no one can stop us. I am 100% convinced of that. I have seen that over 35 years as a diplomat. So my charge to you is that, you know, today of all days, do something nice to your neighbor, be kind, and remember that when we're working together, no one can stop the US of A.
Well said, Ambassador. And you know, authoritarians, extremists, enemies of goodness and democracy have been underestimating us for years, whether their name was Adolf Hitler or Osama bin Laden, whether it was the greatest generation or the folks that were downrange with Greg, or in the air with Dan, or serving in dangerous embassies, or back here in DC getting things done. They have underestimated us to their peril, and they will continue to do so. And we're going to unite and make sure that doesn't happen again. So what we're going to do now, we have a very special presentation. So I would like retired FBI Special Agent and Professor of Practice, Mike Howell, to come join me out here. Mike? Now, Mike is going to make a special presentation, and I'm going to turn the mic over to him at the podium, if that's okay. Mike served a distinguished career in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm going to ask him about that here in a minute. He's also one of our focal points for teaching counterterrorism, law enforcement, and related matters. He has something very special in his hand I'm going to accept on behalf of the Bush School of Government and Public Service. It is a piece of the World Trade Center, and we're going to put this in a very prominent place in the lobby of the Bush School. So at this time, I'm honored to accept this. Mike?
You know, on 9/11, I was working in the Dallas FBI office, and I was on the bank robbery squad, so that's really all I knew. I didn't know anything about terrorism or anything that goes along with that. So my mind got a little jumbled. You know, it's like how do you make sense of things, and how do you get going after you see these attacks? When I heard Greg Vogel speak, that's really the first things I thought of was this is our Pearl Harbor. This is our generation's Pearl Harbor, and he's right. All of them are right. America came together as a nation after that event in ways that I never saw and that I've never seen since, and that I hope to see again and again. You know, on that day, as a law enforcement officer, I was noting all the firefighters that died, 343 of them, all the police officers, 72, including 2 FBI agents, all the civilians who were sworn to protect and defend, you know, under the Constitution of the United States, thousands of them. And that was a loss. And then I was noting the military people that got killed that day, thousands upon thousands of them that day and afterwards as they went and fought the war on terror, killed and wounded. And I'm just humbled by their sacrifice for others so that others could live. Not only that, but afterwards, more first responders and military members have died from illnesses that they contracted while they were doing evidence recovery or rescue and recovery efforts at the sites. They obtained cancers or other illnesses, and those are still going on. We've lost thousands of people to those. So I was talking one day to a couple students a couple years ago and talking about the ability to get a piece of the World Trade Center. And one student, Lenny Vargo, who's since graduated, said, "Hey, I'd like to spearhead this effort." And it's really due to his efforts, his calls, his letters, and the efforts of a guy named Scott Donaldson, who heads the Collin County Law Enforcement Academy up in the Dallas area, that we were able to receive this piece of the World Trade Center. And I hope that each of you will see this. The dean has put up a display case in the lobby, and I believe that's where this is going to go. I hope you guys will look at that and think about the sacrifices of the people on 9/11 and the people after 9/11. And then I hope you'll use that to motivate you. I hope you'll look at it every day, and I hope that you will take the message that is going to show and go out and serve the world. You're the next generation out there that's going to protect this country, as Professor Vogel said. In fact, when he was talking, I about left and joined the Marine Corps because I was motivated so much by what he was telling me right there. And I'm not kidding. He motivates me pretty much on a daily basis. He's just a great man. But we've got this piece now. It's going to be displayed. It's going to be displayed with some other items. And I want to thank all you guys for coming to the Bush School, and thank everyone who I get to work with. I'm very privileged to work here, and very privileged to be up here making this presentation to you, Dean. Okay, I'll just be real quick on that. So on 9/11, I was on the bank robbery squad. Didn't know anything about terrorism. Everybody stopped what they were doing and started working terrorism on that day across the nation. There's not that many FBI agents. There's only about 10,000 at the time. I captured 2 of America's Most Wanted just a few days after 9/11. Didn't make the news at all. So usually that would have led the news. So on that day, 9/11, I knew that things had changed, but on that day, really the change for me was, after you capture 2 freaking violent bank robbers, and there's nothing about it, is you need to do something that's more tangible, more valuable for the nation. So I put in to start working terrorism, and I was able to do that and go all over the Middle East and North Africa on much shorter deployments than Professor Vogel, for sure. But and I felt that I did my service there. So that's pretty much my story for 9/11. Okay.
Let's give Mike a big round of applause. So, doing the moderator's initiative here, we have a few minutes here. And Mike, if you don't mind standing there at the podium, I'm going to open the floor for questions. We can take a couple here. If not, that's fine, but we would welcome questions for the panel if anyone wants to ask. We'll repeat the question up here because we have cameras filming this. Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask? Ma'am. Most effective way to unite the country as students given the current environment and everything. So Greg, we'll start with you, sir. We'll kind of do a lightning round here.
I was taught when I was a lot younger than y'all. Respect tender is respect gained. We respect each other in this country. We're family. We may not always agree. The great thing about this country is we're allowed to disagree, but we do it as family, because that's who we are. And respect tendered is respect gained. Remember that. And remember that these are your countrymen. These are your fellow citizens. You're going to go forward with them, and you're going to do great things for this nation together. You honor those that had paid the price for this nation since 1776 by going forward together and respecting each other. So that's what I tell you.
My son this morning texted us. We have a family group chat, and he said, the people on the Flight 93, they were Democrats, Republicans, Christians, Muslims, atheists, and they all got together and became heroes for our nation. I've been very, very upset about what happened yesterday. I want to ask you to try not to get sucked into the people being nasty on both sides. And also, please be aware that a lot of the stuff you see on social media are things that are being generated by other countries to piss off each other here in the United States. So please recognize that what you're seeing on Facebook, Twitter, all of that, before you get angry, please recognize a lot of that is there to anger us and to turn on each other. And so that makes us angry at each other so much that we want to hurt each other. And that is so wrong. And I'm begging you, please, when you argue, debate, I listened to Charlie Kirk. I didn't really agree with him, but I respected the way he debated. Okay, please just keep an open mind, learn from one another, and the next generation of leaders, let's try not to fall in that trap of name calling and mean social media things. Let's just be really good people and respect each other and learn from each other and try really hard to move on.
I'm not real good technically. I'd like to say one other thing here. I've talked about the greatest generation. You know who won World War II? 18, 19, 20, and 21-year-olds. People your age went forth for this nation and saved the free world. So don't tell me you can't bring this country together. 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. And I'll tell you one other thing. I've been in a few tight situations in my life, and when it got tight, nobody looked at each other and said, hey, you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? Are you an independent? They didn't really care who you were. They knew you were a fellow countryman, and they knew that you could count on it. And unfortunately, when people go down, they bleed one color. It's red. Red, white, and blue.
Dean, thank you for the question, man. If I could ask you to do one thing, put down your phones, actually talk to people, and more importantly than that, listen. And I mean really listen. One of the greatest jobs of a diplomat is to meet a lot of people. I've disagreed with a heck of a lot of them. Some of them are really nasty people, and you may disagree with people in this room. Okay. But, we're Americans. I think we need to listen to each other more. It's so easy to criticize and to get angry, to hate. That's taking the easy way out, people. This school is about doing the right thing when it's really hard. And when you have a disagreement, yeah, it's hard to find common ground. But we're all Americans at the end of the day, regardless of what political color you are. And I just ask you to try to be respectful, try to listen. Really, all I'm saying is try to do what your grandmother or your grandfather would have told you to do, and be kind. He could be.
I'm just going to add on a little bit to what Professor Vogel and the ambassador said. When you're overseas serving, a lot of times, whether it be in an embassy or out in the field, and you're there for a significant event like the anniversary of 9/11 or 4th of July, and you look up and you see that American flag, and you're over there serving your country in a foreign land, and you're not celebrating with your family and things like that. To me, that's the closest I got to the 9/12 event, right? Is everybody's an American, is when I looked at the flag on those special days. That's what I felt too. So maybe that's just idealism on my part, but that's kind of what I like to do. And I'm proud of that idealism for America.
Thank you all. Thank you all for that. I think we have time maybe for at least one more question. I'm going to start here, sir. So the question is, as time goes on, how do we keep up this character of commonality that was so prominent right after 9/11 as it recedes further into the past? Colleagues?
I'm going to echo a lot of what you've already heard, but I'm going to attach some names to it. Like Professor Hennessy Island was saying, talk to people. And you have such a rich resource being here at the Bush School. Obviously, you have professors who are trying to teach you things, but there are so many people other than who's up on the stage who can tell you about their experiences and where they've been and what they've done. Colonel Mike Riley is a great example, Marine Corps Colonel, Lieutenant Colonel Danny Davis. These are professors in the Bush School who have real world experience doing a lot of these things and can talk to you about how to do that. And the more stories that you hear, and the more stories that you collect as you go along the way are going to encourage you, and they're going to really make this this event that was so long ago real to you. And the more you learn about it, the more you read about it, make it real for yourself.
Thank you, Clay. Other? Thank you for that question, sir. We had one more in the back over here. Yes. So what can unite us? What can be a common leadership goal that's not a tragedy, but something else?
Well, I think if you're talking writ large, right, for your generation, peace and prosperity, right? Isn't that what every generation wants? That's what we would like, the United States to go forward in peace and prosperity. I mean, it sounds kind of simple, but that's what it is. We have a lot of divisiveness internally. That's internal peace that we don't have. We can start there, but then obviously for the rest of it, I mean, it sounds simple, but really that's kind of what it comes down to, right?
If I can add, we had an event here last week called the McLean Leadership Award by Drayton McLean, former owner of the Houston Astros. And we recognized Mr. Peter McKenna, who's the CEO of Baylor Scott and White Hospital System. And he sat right on this stage here and shared some wisdom. So I want to make sure I quote him, or at least what he was getting at. Your generation is at the cusp of maybe the greatest innovations in human history. And that sounds like hyperbole, but it's not. With AI, new capabilities, and I'm not talking just about what you're seeing on your cell phone, a way to cure disease, explore the solar system, communicate in ways we've not been able to communicate in, to share knowledge in ways. And yeah, we're worried about how these can be used for ill will, misinformation, lethal ways, and all kinds of stuff. You all are going to be the ones that are going to help determine that direction. And here at the Bush School of Government and Public Service, you're going to help set that path. So the decision's up to you. We're going to help get you ready. But the folks you've seen on this stage, we've had our turn at bat. It's your turn. All right? We're going to do everything to coach you up and get you ready. But you're the ones that are going to come up with the innovations. You're the ones that are going to come up with new ways to learn and teach. You're the ones that are going to be coming up with even quicker ways to respond to flooding in West Texas. you're going to help cure Alzheimer's, or your colleagues in medicine are. You're going to come up with policies. They're going to make sure Russian disinformation never gets into your social media feed, and you can tell Vladimir Putin to go to hell. All right? That's what you're going to be doing. It's your generation that's going to do this. Again, the folks sitting to my right and standing to my left here, heroes. They've had their turn at bat on this and have done some pretty amazing things. And I would ask you, as you go to classes, ask them about it. You know, as they've been working on this for decades, but you're at the cusp of your careers, and you're the ones that are going to solve it.
Dean,
So, yep, go ahead, please, sir.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, sir. If you want a role model, study the man that this school is named after. Study the man that this school is named after. You talk about a statesman and a leader and a kind human being. That's what you should study. All of you should study and feel privileged that you're going to a school named after somebody that truly was a great American.
Well said. We're about to wrap up. Any final comments from my colleagues? Anything you would like to add?
I would like you to show the picture. Can you show the picture over Iraq? I took that, and I'm very proud of it. And I want you to know that I never thought someone like me would be able to deploy to a place like Iraq, and I did. So if you have any doubt, don't. You're going to be doing something like that, and I'm so proud of you, and I can't wait to see what you do.
Tell them who you're with.
McCraven's Special Operations.
Yeah.
Admiral, yes.
Yeah.
Admiral, yes. I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah.
See, I'm a civilian. I had to learn.
Yeah. All right. Well, as we get ready to wrap up here, you've heard about a terrible, tragic event, but which brought out public service commitment, career-changing decisions, whether it was to stay in counterinsurgency training, whether it was to go to Iraq, whether it was to keep chasing bank robbers and making giant, monumental arrests, even in light of everything going on. It was to answer the call of foreign service. It was to go across the border into Afghanistan. It was to raise their hand to enlist and say, send me after 9/11. Here's what I want to close with. We've talked about September 11th, but you know what I did on September 12th? Got up at 2:30 in the morning. I was on the road on Interstate 66 from Centerville, Virginia to get to the White House. We were there by 3:30 in the morning, and we were ready for business. There's a sign, I don't know if it's still there or not, outside the Counterterrorism Center at CIA that said every day is September 12th. Think about what that means. And I'll leave you with this. Let's roll. Thank you very much.